Hartwell Church of God. We're so glad that you decided to join us again for our Wednesday night Bible study on the book of Ecclesiastes. I hope that you were able to watch our video from last week. We went over chapters 1 and 2. It was a great lesson. There was so much information to take in at one time, but I hope that you were able to learn a lot through that. Tonight we'll be doing chapters 3 and 4. I'm actually very excited about this lesson as well. I'm really enjoying the study. I hope that you guys are enjoying it as well. I feel like there is so much information that we can pull from this one small book that's so applicable to our everyday lives. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. Like I said, we are doing chapters 3 and 4 tonight. So when we start into chapter 3, we see that we are dealing with basically time. And that's what a lot of this study tonight is going to be looking at. And this is probably the most popular set of verses from Ecclesiastes. We hear these verses a lot of times at funerals, at weddings, at different things. It's very popular. I actually used to have it hanging on the walls of our home. But I'm going to actually read it for you really quick. It's the first 8 verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It says, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace." So as I said, probably most of you have heard this set of verses before, but basically what it's dealing with is time and change and the seasons of life that we go through, and the different things that these seasons and these changes of our lives can bring. So we know, of course, that change is inevitable, right? It's a part of life. Whether you are somebody who enjoys change or somebody who detests it greatly, it comes for you, and it comes throughout your entire life. And like I said, there's people like my mom. I've always thought it's so funny, the way that she loves change. Anytime she's going to be doing something new or meeting someone new or going to a new place, anytime she was ever starting a new job, anything like that, she was so excited about it. She loved the idea of new places and new people. And then you have someone like me who is legitimately the extreme opposite of that. I hate every aspect that has anything to do with change. It terrifies me. And I've always been that way. I always, I stayed in the same school. I've always had the same friends. I'm 34 years old, and 33 of those years I lived in the exact same county. I started working at a hospital when I graduated nursing school, and I just stayed there until we came up here. I've always loved the familiarity of things staying the same and being in the same place and having the same people in my life. But as much as I love that, as much comfort as I find in that familiarity and nothing changing, there have always been times in my life where change has come, and I've had to adapt to change, and I've had to adapt to the new seasons in my life and the time in between those seasons and what needed to be done with it. And that's something that we all experience. But something that, we'll kind of get into here that the author brings up, which I really love, the author of the study that, that we're doing, is she talks about how our time in between those seasons basically is so significant to God. And she brings up Psalms chapter 90, verse 12, which says, "Teach us to number our days that we may have a heart of wisdom." And kind of the point that she's bringing out here is, when we're going through these different seasons and we're going through changes and, we're talking about our time and how we spend it and things like that. The point that she's really trying to make through all this is that our time should still always be used to glorify God, right? We should always be trying to use our time for something significant, something for the kingdom, okay? So as we move on, we're going to get into verses 9 through 15. Um, this starts dealing more with God's perspective of time, which I think is actually pretty cool. So when we get into it, I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to hit verse 11 really quick. And this is also a verse that you've probably heard before. It says, He has made everything beautiful in His time. Also, He has set the world in their heart so that no man can find out the work that God makes from the beginning to the end. And along this issue, the author of the study, she brought up jigsaw puzzles, which I thought was a perfect example when we're talking about this. I've never been a big puzzle person. I was never, I just never really cared. And one year we were at Disney World, and Scarlett and Savannah were very small, and Scarlett found a little Disney jigsaw puzzle. I say little, it was 1,000 pieces. And it was, if you know what Thomas Kincaid is, he paints beautiful portraits and, landscape paintings and things like that. And it was a Disney Thomas Kincaid puzzle. And I bought it, and we went home, and as I was doing this puzzle for the girls, it was driving them absolutely insane. I told Scarlett I would get it done, and we would, put the glue on it and stuff and hang it up in her room. And here I was with this 1,000-piece puzzle, and every time I would look at it, I would feel so overwhelmed, and she would just sit there with tears rolling down her face. And she kept saying, I need it to be done. I need it to be done. And I'd say, but look, you see all the beautiful pieces coming together. And she'd say, no, I don't care. I just want to see what it looks like when we're finished with it. And now I have my mother-in-law who does the same thing. I love it. We get so excited picking out jigsaw puzzles for her. She loves to do jigsaw puzzles. So anytime, she has, Christmas or a birthday or something like that, Scarlett and Savannah always want to pick her out a jigsaw puzzle that has something to do with Disney. And then they always say, well, is she working on it yet? And I'll say, well, message her and see. And most of the time Scarlett will say, I'll just wait until she tells me she's done. I don't want to see it halfway done. But this is how most of us look at things, right? When, especially when we're in the bad times. But sometimes, often when we're in the good times, we want everything to be done instantaneously. We want to see what it is that God's going to do with it. We know that He has a plan. We know that He's putting the pieces together in the background, but it's so hard for us sometimes when we're sitting there watching it and it's not done, and He's still having to move the pieces, and we're still in that waiting period. But, here Ecclesiastes tells us He makes all things beautiful in His time. He's working it all out. He's got everything planned out. He knows where every piece goes, and it's all going to come together to make something beautiful, because He doesn't do anything that's not beautiful. Everything He creates is beautiful. But sometimes, we get so wrapped up in the fact that we're in the middle of it, and we're seeing all the pieces scattered everywhere, and we can't see what the final picture is going to be. So then we're going to get into verses 14 and 15. It says, I know that whatsoever God does, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God does it, that men should fear before Him. That which has been is now, and that which is to be has already been. And God requires that which is past. And, when I read this the other night, it was funny. I actually got sort of irritated about it. And I pulled Pastor Jeremy into it, and I said, this just sounds like it's going in circles, and I have no idea what they're saying. And, so Pastor Jeremy starts breaking it down and trying to look at each part of this verse. But basically, what he is saying here, it comes back to this concept that we've talked about, that he brings up so many times, that there's nothing new under the sun. And that's basically what this verse is coming back to. Everything that could potentially happen to us, the things that we're going to go through, the things that we're going to experience, they're not new things. They've always been. Marital problems, they've always been. Financial problems, they've always been. Family members who are battling sickness, it's always been. Depression, it's always been. There is nothing new that is going to creep up that there's no way to handle. There's nothing new that's going to creep up in our lives that God doesn't already have a way out for us. There are, if you consider anything that possibly went wrong with you or with your family, say it just in the past month, you can pretty much be sure, right, that somebody either that or somebody, that you've heard about, there's somebody else that has dealt with it too. And that's basically what these verses are saying, that we all go through these struggles. Everything that we go through, someone else has been through it. Someone else has survived it. someone else hopefully has learned to depend on the Lord through it for him to bring them through that time in their life that they were going through. And it's important that we as Christians, when we're going through these battles and we're going through these times, maybe where things are not great, and we're in a season of our life, or we're going through a change of in our lives where things are not looking great, and where there is a struggle, and things aren't looking to us like we're going to be able to find a way out, or like we're going to be able to find a way to succeed. It's important during those times that we as Christians not only learn to lean on God to pull us through it and to guide us through it, but that we also use those times. When we come across people later on in our Christian lives, I've always said this to the girls, when we go through something, we use it. There's no point in experiencing these low times in our lives, and there's no point in going through struggles if we come out of it and we're none the wiser for it. And so we're supposed to use those times to turn around and help other people when it's their turn to go through that same struggle, and to be there to give them something to lean on and to point them to Christ and to remind them, hey, I've been through it too. This is not new. This season of life that you're in, other people have experienced it too. And this is how they came through it. This is how the Lord brought them out of it. So then we're going to get into verses 16 to 22. And this is where Solomon he shifts gears a little bit. And when I'm doing this study, a lot of times I laugh because I think he really does shift gears very, very quickly. He reminds me a lot of Pastor Jeremy, how we'll be having a discussion sometimes, and we're right in the middle of discussing something, and within a split second, he has moved on to a completely different discussion, and he's going down this list of things that we weren't even talking about 2 seconds ago. And I have noticed that King Solomon tends to do that exact same thing. He will be discussing one thing and then he shifts gears, but even moving into this, this new subject area, he is still dealing with the issue of time. So in 16 and 17, I'm going to read it really quick. It says, "Moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work." So we know that in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we read that everybody, regardless of who you are, everybody will appear before the judgment seat of Christ. And 2 Corinthians says, this is so that each of us may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. So, this is our reminder, right? We know that everything in the Bible is true. And, we're assured here in 2 Corinthians, regardless of what has been done on earth, regardless of what our actions were, the good and the bad, it's all going to be judged one day. There is no one that will escape that judgment. But what King Solomon is trying to mention here is that, as humans, this can be a struggle for us, especially when someone has wronged us, especially when somebody's done something that hurt us. We want to see that instant punishment, right? We want to see that, okay, that person, they did something to hurt my family. They hurt my child. They hurt my spouse. They did something. I want to see, them get punishment for what they did. They need to pay for what they did. And we want that because in a way it helps us to feel better. Okay, well, they hurt us, but they got hurt too. But oftentimes, as I'm sure most of you know, we don't always see that. And I know there's been so many times in my life where, I've been talking to someone and they've said, I don't understand because this person, committed this injustice against me. They hurt me. They did this horrible thing to my family. They stole from me. They, this whole, the list goes on of things that people have done, and they say they got away with it. And I don't understand how they can do something so horrible and there's no punishment for them. They got away with what they did. And, the response to that is always, and this is what King Solomon's trying to bring up here, is that our aspect of time is completely different from God's aspect of time, right? And when we are wronged or when we do something wrong, he knows it, right? He is the one who ultimately will judge. It may be that whoever it is that committed this injustice, they may not ever receive any punishment here on earth. The person who's been wronged may never see justice done here on earth. But we are assured in the Bible, God's word tells us that everyone eventually will stand before God and they will be judged for what they did, whether it was good or bad. It's just that he doesn't see time the same way that we does. So he's not necessarily interested in making sure that that person is punished immediately. That's not what it's about with him. But we are assured that eventually that person will be punished. So as we move on, getting closer to the end of chapter 3, we start talking about, still kind of in keeping with this thing of time, Solomon starts dealing with the idea of our time here and how really insignificant it is. Because, and as he says it, we as humans end up the same as animals, basically. So verses 18 to 21, he says, I said in my heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalls the sons of men befalls beasts. Even one thing befalls them. As the one dies, so dies the other. Yes, they have all one breath, so that a man has no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. All go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows the spirit of man that goes upward, and the spirit of the beast that goes downward to the earth? So basically, he's just reminding us here that what we do on earth is all very temporary, right? At the end of it, we know that our soul is not, it doesn't just come to an end. We just had this discussion a while back with someone of a different religion who said, well, when you die, you just cease to exist. That's it. Well, your body dies. And here we read, our body turns back to dust, just the same way an animal's does. But the Bible teaches us that when we're absent from the body, our soul is present with the Lord. But this is just his reminder that, all the things that we do here and the time spent, ultimately, when that time is up, your soul and your spirit will continue on, but your body is done. It goes back to the dust just like animals. So for people who fixate on their time here and what they do and what they look like and every little detail about it, he's saying this isn't what matters, because ultimately you're just going to be a part of the ground again. And then he wraps up chapter 3 in verse 22. He's basically just saying, because of this concept of time, use the time that you have for joy. Use it. He says, use it to rejoice in what God's given you. Whatever lot in life it is that God has given to you, enjoy it. Enjoy the time. Don't run yourself into the ground trying to constantly get more and do more and see more. Enjoy your time. When you work, take time to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Take time to enjoy what it is that God has blessed you with, because ultimately that time runs out. So then we get into chapter 4. And chapter 4, King Solomon is dealing with oppression and competition within the world around him. And this is something that, I was really glad that it got brought up here, because I felt like in so many aspects it lined up very much with our message that Pastor Jeremy preached on Sunday morning, talking about the world around us and the evil around us, and how things have just become so commonplace to us that we barely even notice it anymore. But what we see here when we start getting into chapter 4 is that Solomon genuinely feels oppressed, and he feels oppressed by the evil that is going on around him. And so he says, so I returned and considered all of the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. Wherefore I praised the dead, which are already dead, more than the living, which are yet alive. Yes, better is he than both they, which has not yet been, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. So basically what he's saying here is that everything around him is so bad, that the sin and the wickedness of man is so bad, and he feels so oppressed that he almost envies people who have never even existed. He starts by saying, I envy people who have already died, because they're not having to experience it. But then he takes it a step further and says, no, actually, it's better for people that have never even lived, so that they've never had to witness the extent of the wickedness around us. And this is something that, of course, we're experiencing now on a daily basis. And it seems like every day when we wake up, it's almost a little worse than it was the day before. How wicked, especially, here in our country, every time we turn around, it's something else. There's something else, wicked that we just see happening before our faces, and or right before our eyes. And it seems so many times like, how much worse can it get? And then we're scared to ask that question, because ultimately, very, very quickly after that, something else much worse comes along. And it's easy to feel oppressed by the growing level of evil and wickedness around us. So he's talking about this overwhelming feeling of oppression by what's happening. And then he instantly kind of shifts gears a little bit, and he starts talking about the people that are around him who he feels like they have no balance in their lives. And he's basically referring to, and we actually talked about this some last week in the 1st and 2nd chapter, that King Solomon struggles a lot with people, and I believe it's because he admits he did it a lot himself. People who they can't find the balance between being lazy and obsessively working, and not understanding that their time here is temporary, and that they're supposed to be working for, the kingdom of God, but all of their focus is, this same phrase that we keep using, what's under the sun. And so the author of the study, she kind of talks about how this is a huge struggle for us today. It's not unusual, right? If you're, to be talking, especially moms are super, super guilty of it. I have done it myself, where we have this idea that we're supposed to have a mile-long list and a daily itinerary where every 15-minute segment is accounted for, and our kids are supposed to be doing this and this and this, and then when this sport ends, it's time for this one, and then when that ends, it's time for this one. And I've had conversations with young kids and teenagers alike, especially in my years working with teenagers, where I've had them sometimes say, I just want a break. I just want to relax. I want to have a day where I can come home from school and just do my homework and have dinner and relax. But we as a society, especially now, we tend to constantly fixate on, I've got to keep everybody busy. I have to keep myself busy, and I have to constantly be doing something because that's what makes me a better person. And I have to keep my kids busy, and they have to constantly be doing something, and they have to constantly be working for something because that's going to make them better people. And one of the things that we see Solomon trying to warn against, and I love it, he brings it up in verse 6 here in chapter 4. I'm going to read it. It says, "Better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit." So this is basically him reminding that it's better to just have one hand full of peace and quiet than to have both of your hands full with stuff that keeps you constantly busy, that you can never really finish, that you can never really accomplish, that you're constantly trying to get better at and get more of. He's saying it's better to have half of that and to just have the one handful and have that quiet and have that peace. So then as we get down into it, we get into verse 8. I'm going to read verse 8 too. It says, "There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yes, he has neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches, neither says he, for whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity. Yes, it is a sore travail." So here basically he's just reiterating this idea that these people who are using their time on earth to constantly be trying to get more, and they're constantly working for more, and they're constantly having to keep every second filled with something that they think is going to better themselves and better their lives. He's basically saying, that what we keep bringing up, that, travail, that vexation of spirit. He's basically saying those people are always going to have that. They're never going to find themselves at rest. They're never really going to find what it is that they're searching for, because they're constantly trying to keep their lives and keep their time full. And they're never really going to find peace when they're living their lives that way. So moving into the second half of chapter 4, and I really love this section as well, is actually dealing with friendship. So when we look at verses 9 through 12, we kind of see him talking about some things that make a person a good friend. And it says 2 are better than 1. And of course, we know that's a very popular verse from Ecclesiastes as well, because they have a good reward for their labor. Again, if 2 lie together, then they have heat. But how can 1 be warm alone? And if 1 prevail against him, 2 shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So here we just see Solomon basically taking a little bit of time to show us the importance of having godly friendships. And of course, we know our time here on earth is fleeting. But the author of the study, I love this. She took time at this point to say, even some of the most renowned characters in the Bible, they're associated with a godly friend. And so she brought up Moses. She said Moses had Aaron, David had Jonathan, Ruth had Naomi, and Paul had Barnabas and Timothy. So these are people who, when we hear those names, we instantly remember who they were and what they did and the impact that they had on the kingdom of God. But she's trying to point out that these people all had a godly friend in their lives that they depended heavily on. And one of the things that as chapter 4 is coming to a close, one of the things that we see Solomon focus on, he actually just tells a quick little story about a king who was in power. But, he had gotten cocky and arrogant over the years, and the people were sick of him. But there was this young boy who was wise. And they said, well, we're going to make him king. We're sick of this king. And all the people were so excited about this young boy because of his wisdom. And, he was going to come in and he was going to be a great king. And he replaced the king. And he became king himself. But then it said, after a little while, the people didn't care anymore. Nobody rejoiced over him any longer. Because what we tend to find, and I'm sure almost everyone has experienced it at some time in their lives with our friendships, is that it tends to be a certain way, right? When everything's going good and you're feeling like you're in the center of things and you're kind of doing what everybody wants you to do, and you've got all these friends around you and you think, okay, I've got a good system around me. These people are good. They have fun with me and they encourage me. But then when we get to those low times, unfortunately, we find out that those same friends aren't always there. And this is where, Solomon is really trying to push the importance of not just a friendship, but a godly friendship, and seeking out those people who will encourage you. That way, when you're going through, these times where maybe you're up on the mountaintop and everything's great, then that's great that you're surrounded by these friends. But when you're in those times that we discussed, you're going through those seasons of life and those times of life where things are bad and you're struggling and you don't see a way out. It's during those times when those people that you've surrounded yourself with is really going to matter. And of course, the author points out too, at the end of the day, there are some people who will say, I don't actually have any close friends like that. I don't have anyone like that. You have the best friend possible, the best friend available. The one friend who will never let you down, the one friend who never changes, who never, takes a bad mood out on you or doesn't have time for you that day, and that is Jesus Christ. And we have, each of us has him there, as our best friend, that we know that we can always lean on, we can always depend on, and he's always there and ready and waiting for us with open arms, regardless of what it is we're going through. So that's where he ends chapter 4. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I know it was kind of a lot of information to take in. I try to keep it under 30 minutes. And as I said, he kind of switches from subject to subject so quickly, and I try to keep it all tied in together. But I hope that you guys are enjoying it. I know I definitely am. I'm already learning so much from this study. If there is anything that we can do, that we can address in this, that, if you have any questions that you want me to look into and answer, just shoot me a message and let me know. If not, we will see you guys next time, and we love you so much.